Good afternoon! If you're here joining me on this video, it's because you get to be a part of a very special project to help us celebrate Transfiguration. Now, Transfiguration this year is on Sunday, February 14th. Now, for those of you at home, what day do you think February 14th is? I'll give you just a second to guess. If you guessed Valentine's Day, you're completely correct! And so, to help us celebrate Valentine's Day, we are going to read some love letters from God. And in turn, you might be able to help us and write a love letter to God. So we're going to read 13 stories over the course of 2 weeks. So let's get started. This story is from Genesis. In the very beginning, close your eyes. Can you see the darkness? Did you know that thousands and thousands of years ago, in the very beginning, before God made the world, that's what it was like? Just darkness. Then one magical morning, God said, "Let there be light." And just like that, the light came. Open your eyes and see the bright, wonderful world God has made. He made everything you can see around you. He made mighty mountains and silver seas. He made green grass and tall trees. He made leopards that leap and eagles that soar. He made bees that buzz and lions that roar. But there was one thing God made that was better than anything else. One day, God made people. People who could run and jump. People who could laugh and play. People just like you and me. He made a man named Adam and a woman named Eve, and he gave them a beautiful garden to live in called Eden. For 6 whole days, God worked really hard making our wonderful world. When God saw everything that he made, a great big smile spread across his face because he knew that it was all really, really good. And can you guess what he did on the 7th day? He took a great big rest. Here are our pictures. We have the sun and the lions and the giraffes and Adam and Eve. And look, I think we have a letter. Should we read it? Your love letter from God. Dear children of First Lutheran, do you like making things? Have you ever made something you felt really proud of? Something you thought was so good that it made you smile? That's how I felt when I made the world. I had so much fun. But do you know the very best thing I made? It was you. And guess what? I haven't finished making you yet. As you grow up, I want you to become so amazing that everyone around you will smile, including me. So keep reading this book. It's not just a story, it's my very special letter to you. With all my love, God. Our second story is about a friend we have named Noah. Plip, plop, plip, plop. Was that rain? Noah woke from his sleep and jumped out of bed. Hurrying to the window, Noah peeked out and saw huge gray clouds scurrying towards his house. Noah was ready. For weeks and weeks now, he had been building his big, beautiful boat God told him to make. Today was the day he would get to use it. The day when the mighty rains would begin and a flood would cover the whole earth and clean it. Thank goodness Noah had listened to God and made a boat just like God had told him. Now Noah and his family and all the animals would be safe on the ark. Noah hammered in the last of his nails and then quickly checked his list. 2 big badgers, 2 blind bats, 2 strong camels, 2 cute cats, 2 fast foxes and 2 fit frogs, 2 shy deer and 2 young dogs, 2 tall flamingos, 2 fat fleas, 2 black bears, and 2 small bees. Noah's list went on for a long, long time. until finally all the animals were checked in and safely on board. For 40 days and 40 nights the rains fell, covering the earth and water. The grass disappeared and the trees disappeared. The mountains disappeared until there was nothing to see except water. In the big boat, Noah was worried. He stood by the window and wondered whether God would remember him. Of course he would. Even though Noah could not see it, God's huge hand was carrying that boat safely until it came to dry ground. How happy Noah was to be back on land again! All the animals couldn't wait to get off the ark. 2 ran, 2 hopped, 2 slithered, 2 crawled, and 2 flew, all in different directions to find new homes. Noah knelt down to say a thank you prayer as God painted a rainbow in the sky above. It was and is a wonderful reminder of God's forever love. And I think I see another letter for us to read. Dear children of First Lutheran, I am so glad Noah listened to me and built that big boat just like I told him. As you are growing up, I want you to be like Noah. I want you to listen to me and to try to do what I tell you. And remember, just like I carried Noah, I will carry you all through your life. No matter where you travel, whether you're in a car or a train or an airplane or a big boat, just like Noah, I will carry you wherever you go. Love, God. I think we have another story. The Little Boy Who Listened. Candles flickered in the dark rooms. Shadows danced on the walls of the temple where little Samuel lived. It had been a very busy day for him. Samuel had brushed the big wooden floors, cleaned the candlesticks, and polished the plates. Now he was tired and ready for bed. Samuel crawled onto his little mat and pulled his blanket over his head. And suddenly he heard someone calling his name. Samuel! Samuel! Samuel jumped up and ran to Eli's room. What did Eli, the old priest, want at this time of night? But guess what? Eli had not called to Samuel at all. Eli was lying down, almost asleep. Go back to bed, Samuel, Eli yawned sleepily. I did not call you. So Samuel crawled back into his bed. No sooner had his head touched the pillow than he heard that voice a second time. Samuel! Samuel! And just like before, Samuel ran into Eli's room, but Eli's reply was the same. Go back to bed, Samuel. I did not call you. So Samuel crawled back into his bed again. Samuel! Samuel! The voice came again, and this time little Samuel threw off his blanket and he raced into Eli's room and he shook Eli by the shoulder. You must be calling me, Eli. What do you want? The old priest sat up in bed and he thought for a moment, and then he looked at the young boy. I think God is calling you, he said. If he calls your name again, be sure to tell him you are listening. And so, an excited Samuel went back to his room and waited. Did God really know his name? He was just a little boy. Samuel! Samuel! Samuel immediately sat up in bed and answered, Hello, God, I'm listening. How happy God was to know that Samuel was a good listener. Now God knew that he could speak to Samuel every day, and every day Samuel would be listening. What a wonderful night for Samuel. God knew his name. As the candles flickered and the shadows danced, a happy little Samuel closed his eyes and finally fell asleep. And I think along with Samuel and Eli, we have another letter for us to read. Dear children of First Lutheran, can you believe that I know your name too, just like I knew Samuel's name? Can you believe that you are special to me too, just like Samuel was? It's true. It's so very important that you listen for me calling your name. You might not hear it out loud like Samuel did, but one day you might hear me calling your name inside your heart. So keep listening for me calling. I know your name, you are mine. Love, God. And now I think our Samuel story continues when Samuel gets a little bit older. When Samuel was all grown up, God had a very special job for him to do. Samuel, God said, I want you to go to Jesse's house and ask him to see his 8 sons. I have chosen one of them to be the next king. When you find him, pour some oil on his head to anoint him, so that everyone will know that he is the one I have chosen. That's easy, Samuel thought to himself. I will know the new king right away. He's sure to be tall and handsome and strong and smart. He'll probably be wearing fine, beautiful clothes. I know what a king looks like. Sure enough, when Samuel arrived at Jesse's house, out strode Eliab, the eldest son, looking exactly like Samuel had imagined. He was tall and handsome, strong and smart. He was wearing beautiful clothes that looked like a king's. But as Samuel was about to anoint him, God gently whispered in Samuel's ear, No, Samuel, he is not the one. And now Samuel was a little confused. Are you sure you're not mistaken, God? Samuel asked. That young man really did look like a king to me. But God smiled as he replied, Samuel, I am not looking at how tall or handsome or strong he is. I am not looking for someone with fine clothes. I am looking for someone who has a good heart. So, Samuel, who always listened to God, called for the next son, and the next, and the next, to see if he could find which one God had chosen. But even though each one looked like a king to Samuel, the answer was always the same. As 6 strong sons marched by, God whispered, No, 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 no. Finally, out came the last, the 8th son. He was just a small boy. He had been working out in the fields taking care of the sheep, and his clothes were smelly and torn. God gently whispered in Samuel's ear, Yes, Samuel, anoint him. He is the one. And so it was that young David knelt down at Samuel's feet and was anointed with oil in front of his 7 brothers. God had chosen David, the shepherd boy, the boy with the good heart. And one day, that little boy grew up to be a king. We've got our sheep, and Samuel, and David, and the oil, and I think we have another letter. Dear children of First Lutheran, do you know why I chose David to be king? I think he said why. Can you think about that? Was it because he looked like a king? No. It was because he had a good heart, just like you do. So as you grow up, do not worry about how tall you are, or how smart you are, or how strong you are. Just remember, I have chosen you just like I chose David. And even though you may never be king or queen, you will be something just as wonderful and very, very special to me. With all my love, God. Now I think we have a continuation of David's story. The stone that struck the giant. Goliath was a very ugly, very scary, very big giant. He was as tall as a house, and his eyes were as big as baseballs. His legs were thick as tree trunks. Everyone was afraid of Goliath. Everyone, that is, except little David. Now, David and Goliath were very different. David was small, and Goliath was huge. David was quiet, and Goliath was noisy. David was kind, and Goliath was mean. David sang like a bird, and Goliath roared like a lion. David ate porridge for breakfast, and Goliath ate squirrels. But the most important difference between David and Goliath was that David knew God and Goliath did not. David knew that God was bigger than Goliath. Goliath thought he was bigger than anyone. David knew God was strong, and Goliath thought he was stronger. David knew when it was time for him to fight the huge giant, God would be fighting with him. Goliath thought that when it was time for him to fight that little tiny boy, he could do it alone. Out onto the battlefield marched Goliath. Out onto the battlefield tiptoed David. "I am going to squash you flat," roared Goliath in a huge voice. "My God is so big and so strong and so mighty," sang David in a quiet voice. Goliath lifted his huge sword, and David lifted his small slingshot. Round and round and round David swung that small sling. Out shot one smooth stone, and it flew through the air faster than a speeding bullet. Kaboom! It hit Goliath right in the middle of his big forehead. Goliath dropped his huge sword. He rocked backwards and forwards, and then he fell with a mighty thump to the ground. Little David ran happily home to have his porridge, and Goliath never got to eat another squirrel. Here we have Goliath and little David, and I think we have a letter. Dear children of First Lutheran, I have something very special to tell you. No giant is bigger than me. No giant is stronger than me. So do not be afraid of giant things in your life that might frighten you. Never forget, I am bigger and stronger than anything you might be scared of. So try to be like David. Do not be afraid. And remember, I am always with you, your big, strong friend, God. The lions who lost their lunch. It was an exciting day for the hungry lions as they lay in their den by the king's palace. They had not eaten for days, and boy, were they hungry. But today they would get to eat Daniel, the man who was going to be thrown into their den because he would not stop praying to his God. The hungry lions could hardly wait. Their big tummies rumbled as they heard the guards marching with Daniel towards their den. Suddenly, Daniel was falling and falling and falling down, down, down into the den. Bump! Daniel landed right in front of the hungry lions. Their long whiskers twitched and quivered in delight as they looked at their lunch. Oh my, how good he smelled. Just then Daniel rolled over and got on his knees, and he put his hands together and he closed his eyes. What on earth was he doing? Daniel was talking ever so quietly. Who could he be talking to? Dear God, whispered Daniel, I know you watch over me wherever I go. I know you are watching over me right now. Save me, I pray, from these hungry lions. The lions almost laughed out loud. So that was it. Daniel was praying to his God. Well, that would do him no good at all. But just as they were about to pounce on Daniel, something strange happened. Suddenly, their tummies didn't feel hungry anymore. In fact, they felt quite sleepy. Those big lions closed their big mouths, closed their big eyes, and they fell into a deep, deep sleep. And when they woke up the next morning, their lovely lunch was gone. God had saved Daniel after all. Although the hungry lions lost their lunch that day, they learned an important lesson. They knew, without a doubt, that God, who Daniel loved, was watching over all his children through scary times or happy times, while they were asleep or awake. God was watching over every single one of them, every single minute of every single day. And those lions knew that he must be a very wonderful God indeed. We've got our big lions, and we've got Daniel, and some more lions, and oh, we have a letter. Dear children of First Lutheran, do you know who made the lions go to sleep that day? It was me. And do you know what is so funny about that? I never, ever go to sleep. In fact, I never, ever close my eyes. That is why I am able to watch over you. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I will always be watching over you every single minute of every single day. Watching over you forever, just like I watched over Daniel. With so much love, God. A very smelly belly. Jonah slowly opened his eyes and tried to figure out where he was. He could hear the sound of gurgling, bubbling water. He could feel something slimy and slippery and wet under his feet. But it was so dark that he couldn't see anything. And what was that horrible smell? It had to be the most disgusting, nasty, horrible fishy smell Jonah had ever smelled. Where on earth was he? Was he in a cave? No. Was he in a hole? No. Was he in a great big fish? Yes. Jonah was inside the very smelly belly of a very large fish. How on earth had he gotten there? Then Jonah remembered. Hadn't God asked Jonah to go to Nineveh, to that horrible town, to give those people a message? Hadn't Jonah said no? Hadn't he run away from God and gotten on board that ship? And when the big storm came, hadn't Jonah jumped overboard? Yes, Jonah remembered now. He fell with an enormous plop into that deep, dark, cold water. Then that huge mouth came towards him, swallowing him whole, and he wasn't a great big fish. What should he do now? Jonah decided he would pray. Jonah wobbled to his knees and held his nose, and he prayed, "Thank you, God, for sending this big fish to rescue me. Thank you for listening to my prayers. I know you can hear me, even though I am in the belly of a fish. Thank you for showing me I should do what you ask, to go to Nineveh and take your message to the people." Jonah stopped. The smelly belly had started to rumble and quake, and suddenly the fish gave an enormous hiccup, and Jonah was catapulted through the fish's mouth, did several flying somersaults, and landed upside down on the beach. Jonah got up, brushed the sand from his knees, and peeled away the seaweed that was wrapped around his head, and set off for Nineveh. We've got Jonah and some fish, and look at how big this one is. And it's right next to our letter. Dear children of First Lutheran, poor Jonah. Inside a big fish is really a horrible place to be. I am so glad he prayed to me. So I have a question for you. Do you think I can hear a prayer that you whisper? Or what about one that you say in your head? Do you think I can hear a prayer that you say at a noisy party or in a swimming pool? The answer is yes, I can. So keep praying to me. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, I am listening to your prayers, even if you end up in a big fish. Love always, God. And that concludes our story time for this week. We will finish our love letters to God next week if you hope to join me. And I hope to get to hear that your letters that you wrote to God. Thank you. We'll see you next week.